Good evening and welcome to another edition of What's So Funny, the show that probes the minds, the brains, and the psyches of the people who make them funny. Tonight, we come to you from St. John, New Brunswick, where I spoke to television's Jon Dore and former Vancouverite Harry Doupe, each for a half an hour at the Canadian Comedy Awards. That was almost 1 month ago, but they're still fresh and have never been heard. So enjoy, won't you? Batting lead off, the star of the Jon Dore television show, Mr. Jon Dore. Rolling, we're on the air. Jon Dore television's Jon Dore. It's kind of sad and pathetic that I have to follow you across the country to get an interview when I just saw you last week in Vancouver.
Yeah, I was trying to hide from you, and you win. You win, McPherson.
Thank you very much. I told you can run, but you can't hide. I was wondering, after seeing you last night at that Shishi Club.
Yeah, it was a little shishi, the St. John shishi, which means, interesting.
Well, like this fountain we're sitting in front of right now.
Yeah, we should probably tell people in case they hear ambient noise here. We're in the middle of a mall, a food court of a mall, and there is a fountain, and it looks like they put some kind of dye in the water, so it looks disgusting. Yeah, it's quite beautiful.
Airplanes overhead.
Quite beautiful, yeah. There are fake trees. There are custodians working and cleaning. So that's kind of where we are.
You've spent a lot of time in the Maritimes over your course of your career?
Yeah, I don't know what a lot is, but I've been telling jokes out here, been on tours, performed in St. John before, Halifax. Yeah, it's nice.
I loved how you kept saying you were in Newfoundland last night, and that goes over pretty well.
Well, it's fun to annoy people. And yeah, they have a real sense of pride and distinct identity out here, I find. So if you confuse anything, they're very upset.
Well, then maybe they shouldn't have named their town after the one in Newfoundland.
Well, that's just it. And really find something else to get angry about. I mean, I understand things are bad out here, but, I'm kidding. Go on. Ask me a question.
Are you impervious to the effects of alcohol and drugs? Because last night you seemed to be spot on all night, even though you were drinking like a fish and, partaking outside in between comics. You said this on stage. I don't know if you're aware of it, but you seemed sharp anyway.
I don't want to divulge anything. No, I didn't have anything to drink last night. Well, no, I mean it's a job where I feel like you're
all stage props, are they?
No, I have to be real here. I think we have a job where we kind of get the opportunity to do that. You're only on stage a little bit, and it's a fun little challenge, I think, to turn it into a bit of a party. And that's what it was last night. I felt like, just people coming together for the Comedy Awards, friends that do stand-up I haven't seen in a while. So I think it's a great opportunity to have some drinks and tell some jokes. Yeah, I think, that's part of the fun of doing stand-up is getting into the sauce a bit.
Is it? And that's why you continue to do stand-up, even though you're a big-time TV star now.
That's not why I do it, but it's a nice perk, I think. But I know there may be some younger people listening, so I should probably put a disclaimer out. Drinking is fun.
No doubt you have to be clean and sober during the filming of your wildly successful television show.
Wildly successful? Of course, yeah. I mean, yes, yeah. It's good to be sober for that.
You're nominated for a comedy award. You just found out minutes ago.
Well, no, I knew I was nominated. I just wasn't sure of the category, but yeah.
And you're a past winner, I assume.
Yeah, I won a couple of years ago for Best Newcomer.
Wow. Wait, when was that?
Like 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah.
You are a relative newcomer, aren't you? Because you won the homegrown competition, didn't you?
No, I didn't win the competition. I went back to host it. I was in it and did not win, but hosted it a few times just for laughs. But no, I've been doing stand up for about 11 years now. So I won 4 years ago. So I was a newcomer at 7 years. I don't know if that's appropriate, but that's what happened. And thanks for the money. So
are these awards important to a young performer?
Sure. I mean, I think it all helps. I think it's good to... I mean, there's nothing else like it in Canada, and it's a great... I think it's only going to get better over time. And, yeah, I think it'll... If anything, it's just a fun time for people to get together and hang out and tell jokes. So, for the... Kudos to the organizers for doing it, because no one else is taking the bull by the horns.
Yeah, and it's a real who's who of Toronto and Montreal comedy here.
Yeah, a lot of Toronto, a lot of Montreal. Is there anyone here from Vancouver?
There's Urban Improv, an improv troupe.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's good.
That's it. No stand-up, though.
Well, I guess it's just hard. I don't know. Maybe over time it'll get better once there's a little more money and maybe more sponsors, but and you can afford to fly people in and pay them a little more. Then it'll probably be worth their while. So, yeah, I think it's just a matter of time for it to gain momentum.
Right. I love your show. And Does it get a good critical reaction, or does it even get a critical reaction?
Yeah, people have reviewed it. Okay, thank you, first of all. Nice for you to say that. It's hard for me to talk about. I mean, we had a lot of fun making it. It was a blast. We were very self-indulgent at times while making the show, and the Comedy Network let us do just about everything we wanted to, and they also helped out. The reviews, I feel like I had to give that disclaimer for some reason. The reviews are, when they come from the Globe and Mail, we got a terrible review from the Globe and Mail, we got a terrible review from a guy in the Post, and a terrible review in the Toronto Star, and they just hated it.
Really?
Yeah.
Was this early on in the show?
Well, season 1, we gave them the first 2 episodes to review before we premiered, and they watched them and then ripped the show apart and said that the comedy executives who greenlit the show should be walking around with paper bags on their head, etc. However, in their description of the show, while describing how much they hated it, as you would read it, it seemed like something I would want to watch. It would say things like, and then John interviews a priest about masturbation. And I'd say, well, yeah, that would be, to me, an interesting interview. So, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, that is a selling point. To me, it's a really unique show. And you said you kind of modeled it after the Sacha Baron Cohen?
Well, it didn't model the entire show, but I mean, I've always loved what Ali G does, Sacha Baron Cohen in his characters, or The Daily Show and their correspondence. There's something really fun about extracting information in a humorous way. So when we originally created the show, I knew that I wanted to have real elements and a fake world, and then we just had to find a way to bring those two worlds together.
And you have, in a way that I haven't seen before, even, which is, I mean, so when these critics say that the executives who greenlit it should walk around with paper bags over their head, I'm thinking, no, they're not just bringing out something that's been done over and over again, just slightly different. This is really a unique enterprise, I think.
Well, everything's subjective, and so, I mean, they disliked it for whatever reason. Maybe they felt like if they liked it and their peers, I'm speaking of the critics now, if the critics said they liked it and they found out their peers disliked it, I mean, would they be shunned from their social circle? I don't know.
That's not how it works.
Do they genuinely just hate the show? And that's possible too. And maybe some of the humor. And honestly, I'm not proud of every episode. No, but yeah, for whatever reason, some of the critics didn't like it. But you know, the fans that we've met across the country while going to do stand-up, and they come out to the shows, they like it, so that's what's important. I mean, I know it's not for everyone, and some people won't like it, and that's fine.
You were just using the past tense and saying that you had fun making it and all that. Is it over?
It's dead.
Why is that?
It was aborted. The project was aborted.
At 3 years old?
At 2 years. At 2 years, yeah. Legal in Canada. Yeah, the Comedy Network, I think they wanted to make another season, but I'm not sure if they were able to, because none of the shows came back. I'm not sure, you'd have to talk to the Comedy Network, but yeah, they held on for a while and didn't let us know. We were waiting, and then they said unfortunately they wouldn't be able to make a third season. So,
well, that's a real shame. So how many episodes?
How many episodes will we not continue to make? We will not continue to make any. No, we made 26 episodes, 13 per season. No.
It's going to live on a DVD, though, isn't it?
Well, who knows? I mean, that we haven't even talked about that yet. I would be I would. I don't know. I mean, it's on iTunes.
Each episode's on iTunes.
Each episode is on iTunes. I mean, to do a DVD, I would like to put out what I call a best of DVD, which would be 3 episodes from both seasons. So a total of 3 episodes, the best of. And or maybe like a 10-episode disc of things that I can tolerate being out there on DVD.
Seriously?
Yeah, no, I'm actually being quite...
6 out of 26 episodes.
No, 3 out of 26.
No, you said 3 from each season.
No, 3 total from both seasons, yeah.
Oh, from both seasons.
Yeah.
3 total, really?
That's right, yeah, and maybe half of another one.
Well, I think, it's just a historical piece that you have no say in it. You just have to put it out there and not worry about what you think.
Are you... No, what do you mean? It's all worry with me.
Well, I mean, it was on TV. It aired nationally. People saw it, and no doubt it'll be in reruns.
Yeah, and that's terrifying. So yeah.
It's okay. Specifics. What really do you cringe at when you watch?
Oh, just a few mistakes that we made along the way, or that I made along the way. Performances that I'm not happy with. That things that I wish I'd written a little differently with the writers. Like that's all. I mean, I think it's like anything you put out there. You can't change it afterwards. And I wish you could put a disclaimer on these episodes and say, oh, by the way, keep in mind while watching, this was our first episode. We didn't have the time to shoot this. We had to reshoot this. This particular prop didn't work. It would have been better if. So I know it's terrible. I think in television you have to kind of just say, okay, good enough.
Yeah.
Which is hard to do.
That's my motto.
Because at least with stand-up, for the most part, as long as no one's recording it and putting it up online, it only exists in that moment and in people's memory, and you can continually improve on it.
Right.
So with television, you have to kind of say, all right, let's let everyone see our mistakes.
So you're essentially saying these critics were right.
Yeah. Yeah, they nailed it. Thank you, Globe and Mail.
No, I'm finding this hard to believe because it really stands out in Canadian comedy, I think.
Well, no, but I mean, whether it stands out or not, I mean, it's my own personal kind of point of view. Like, I feel like I'm embarrassed of a few things, and maybe that's harsh and hard, but I mean, it's just kind of the way I am, the way it works, yeah.
Why would you be embarrassed at your full frontal nudity, that your pixelated penis?
Okay, I'll give you that. My body is gorgeous. My bulbous white belly and underdeveloped arms and muscle. It really is like seeing a sunset for the first time. Looking at my body.
There's a rich tradition of that in comedy. Would it be as funny if you were sculpted, if you did work out, if you didn't, if you lifted a few weights?
If I was sculpted, if I did work out.
Yeah, the six-pack, it wouldn't be as funny, would it?
Lifted a few weights. I'd find a way, Guy. I'd find a way to make it funny.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, but to get back to the original question, that's not what you're embarrassed about. You like doing things like that. You're a fearless performer.
Yeah, to a certain extent, but at the same time, it's like it's now old. So I'd like to. I'll stop talking about it. I sound like a maniac here, but yeah, okay, fine. I'm happy with every show. We'll put them out on DVD.
I don't mean to be pressuring you, John.
You're not. I'm creating pressure for myself.
Yeah, in fact, you know what? I'll go even further than that. I think it would be it could be an international hit in syndication.
Well, I'm not going to lie to you, Guy. It's been sold to Portugal and Norway.
Oh, it has?
It has, and the IFC in the States has started airing the show. So they're on they'll be airing episode 8 this week. So, I'm a Eurostar. We got a message from someone in Portugal who's been watching the show on a fan site and said they were thrilled with it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Canadian comedy's doing good.
Yeah, Portugal and Norway are huge supporters of our show. Mm-hmm.
What do you think the role of the critic is in comedy? Like, you seem to take it well, what they said. Does it get under your skin a little bit? Do you think we should just shut up?
Yeah, they should shut up, I think. No, it's hard to say, because I guess we need critics, or do we? I mean, if we really had to scale back in society, if the recession was overwhelming and the mayor of the world said a particular job has to go across the board, reviewers would essentially have to go. No offense, Guy. And, no, I mean, I understand why. I just try and stay away from it. I think, like, even positive reviews are a little bit scary because you can never really explain to these people what your intention was. It's always up to them to kind of decide, and fair enough, it should be up to them. But no, I don't think it affects me that much. I just try not to read anything.
Yeah. It is the least favorite aspect of what I have to do, reviewing, and it's not what I set out to do.
Right.
I just wanted to write about it and publicize what's coming or whatever.
Right.
And then they say, hey, so-and-so's coming, can you go review it? Well, okay, but, I just think of it as a subjective, it's just my opinion. It's like telling your friends, hey, here's a show that I saw, or don't go see it, or for whatever reason.
Right. Are you ever uncomfortable? Like, when you sit down, how much time, how thoughtful are you when describing what you saw? Like, you talked about it's your subjective opinion, but do you ever think of the performer maybe reading it? Does that ever cross your mind?
Yeah, and it's come back a couple times.
Oh, really? For example?
David Cross, who I met last week, too, and he pointed at me, because he had written about my review of him earlier, and he pointed at me and said, you, and I was like, hey, David.
Yeah.
And so we talked about it. We had disagreements and misremembrances, I think, on his part. He thinks on my part.
Right.
But I just try to be fair.
Right.
Without cheap shots, and making it clear that it's my opinion.
Right.
Especially if I go to a show where everybody's laughing and I'm not. Then I'll say how well they're doing, but I don't get it.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, so you try to be obviously as objective as possible and go in there and give the viewer or the reader an idea of what it would have been like to be there. Yeah, I don't know. It's very mean what you do. Joking. But yeah, how did that work out with David Cross then? You had a conversation, and then was it amicable when you left? It was like, okay, we agree to disagree, and
yeah, there were people sitting around, and I just said my side of it, and he said his side.
Right.
He thought that I was misrepresenting him, calling him a racist.
Oh, really? Okay.
And I said, because he had used the phrase drunken Indian, and he said it was only in one show, and I said, no, it was actually in two shows, so it wasn't that you were just responding to a crazy woman in the audience. You obviously were talking about it before that at another show. So, it was amicable. The whole discussion was amicable.
Right. Okay, good.
But yeah, it can get uncomfortable for sure. You run into these people, and they do read, because everyone tries to pretend that they don't care, but they read. They Google their names.
Yeah, you try, and that's kind of the thing, you have to, in this business too, for instance, I had to get my O1 visa, and in order to get my O1 to work in the United States, you have to gather press articles about yourself. Right. And so I remember Googling myself, trying to because you have to print these things off and send in a stack of them just to explain to the United States, the immigration, that you are written about. You do provide a service that people are talking about. Horrible things have been written about me, and you eventually just kind of have to go, who cares? Yeah.
And could you print those off and use them as examples? Well, they're talking about me.
I would love to. I wouldn't send them to. I will use them for something one day, for sure. Yeah.
So you could only use the positive ones for the O1.
I guess so. I think that's what my management would have suggested. So.
Are you working in the States?
I am. Yeah, guy. I'm working down there, telling jokes.
In clubs?
Yeah. In clubs, yeah. Yeah, telling jokes in clubs and auditioning for a few things and doing some writing, and that's about it.
Now, the auditioning process has got to suck, especially given that I trust you were the executive producer of your own show.
Was not executive producer.
You had a big say in it.
Oh yeah. I mean, I was involved in every process, but no, I actually don't mind. I love being down in Los Angeles and being essentially nobody. It's fun, and it's the way it should be, and I feel like going into these rooms to audition is a challenge. It's not something that I'm really good at, but it's a good challenge.
And what kind of roles? Is it sitcoms?
Yeah, there's been some sitcom stuff, some single camera stuff like Scrubs. There hasn't been a lot, but the stuff I am going out for, at least it's meaty stuff that you can sink your teeth into. And, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I'm not a very good actor. I try my best, and so it's a fun process, and, it's great getting an acting coach and things like that.
Really?
It feels like you're doing something.
Are you going to move down there, or have you?
I have, yeah. Yeah, I live there now. I live in Los Angeles.
How's that?
How's living in Los Angeles? It's great. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was apprehensive when I first moved down there, but I like it now. It's consistent weather. The nights are cool. Lots of margaritas. It's good.
And you're doing the clubs at night?
Occasionally, there's hard to get time down there on stage, but yeah, a few clubs I'll perform at, but sparingly, you know.
And nobody knows you when you're doing that, right?
For the most part, yeah, which is great.
That must be nice to surprise people who don't know you, or is it more of a challenge just trying to win somebody over who's sitting there who has no expectation of if you're going to be good or bad?
I don't give it that much thought. I mean, I think just funny's funny, so whoever's up there telling jokes, I mean, it's like the Jerry Seinfeld comedian documentary. He says, you know, you've got that 5-minute grace period. Even if you're Jack Nicholson, after 5 minutes, you better start being genuinely funny. So I don't think it's any different anywhere you go. I think just if you're funny, you'll do well, and people will laugh.
I think of comics like Jeremy Hotz, who's been down there for years. And I don't know because I'm not down there, but it seems to me like he gets most of his work in Canada. And same with John Wing or...
Right. Well, it's a great... I mean, and that's fine. And I don't know if that's totally the case. I know Jeremy does a lot of work in the States, stand-up-wise. And, you know, he's constantly pitching shows and developing television. And hell, why not? I mean, if all your work came from Canada and then you can also live in the United States in a beautiful city like Los Angeles or New York, I mean, why not? So I think that would be fun to fly back into this great city and hang out there and then fly out to work in Canada.
If you got on a hit U.S. series, would you still do the stand-up?
I would hope so, yeah. I mean, I love stand-up. Right now, I feel like I'm just starting to figure stand-up out again a little bit. So, yeah, it'd be fun to just tell jokes, so I can't see that going anywhere.
And your commitment in stand-up, too, is great. I mean, last night you did an Invisible Man for probably 5 minutes.
That went on a little too long last night.
No, yeah. The longer it went, the funnier it got.
Oh, you think so? Okay. Yeah, maybe I'll try 10 minutes. I'll do a one-man show, an invisible one-man show.
It's like Erwin Barker says, you know, if something goes on a bit too long, you start to get uncomfortable, but then it comes around again and starts to get funny again.
Hopefully, yeah, because if it doesn't get funny again, you got to deal with it, but yeah. And
your commitment to the red suspenders joke.
Okay. What about it?
Well, I mean, that requires a lot of effort, and it's not tattooed to your body.
It is not. No, that is a fun yet slightly humiliating joke when you realize I've been drawing suspenders on my body. I mean, for listeners, I'll tell a joke about having a suspender tattoo, but I kind of dismiss it as if I don't. And then later on, I find a reason to get upset and rip my shirt off, and there are suspenders drawn on my body. Yeah. So yeah, when you're in hotel rooms, using a mirror and watching yourself draw suspenders on your own body for a punchline, once you've done that a little too much, you start to question what you're doing. You don't try to wipe it off, do you? Because you'd break your skin doing that. I usually, depending how much I have to drink after the show, sometimes I'll just go to bed with the suspenders on and wake up with a giant red mark on the hotel bed sheets, which is fine. But no, you scrub it off. You scrub it off, guy. Oh, you do? In the bath, yeah, in the shower. You scrub. Yeah, because I've always wondered. That was one question I always wanted to ask. I'm going to give you. I'm going to give you some suspender tattoos. You can walk around, see how it feels. Now, you're a straight-faced comic, which I love. Are your favorite comics yourself also sort of straight-faced, or do you like all the stuff? What do you mean by straight-faced? Well, you know, not someone who comes out there and is laughing at their own jokes or overly animated. Right. You come out. You have fairly serious demeanor. Right. You can say something, build up to a big serious. All of a sudden you're talking about laughter is the best medicine. And then you have this great sideways punchline coming in that people aren't expecting because you're building up as to be serious, right? And you can pull it off with your face. Yeah, I don't know. I guess. I guess what you're saying is that you really like my face, but and I do too. I don't know where that comes from or why. I guess it's just what I started to love was, misdirecting people. And I guess that's kind of what comedy is. But I mean, yeah, it's fun to pretend that you're everybody's friend and this guy's going to be earnest and sweet. And then, what did he just say? I mean, Leslie Nielsen, for instance, in any of the Airplane movies, I love how he delivers straight lines and he doesn't get what he's saying. And that's kind of the attitude, I think, is just being an ignorant character, but the character believes that this is right. And I think that's where the funny may come from. I don't know. But yeah, no. What was the original question? Were you asking me? Oh, if also your favorite comics are like that as well. Well, I mean, Steve Martin, Andy Kaufman, But I love everyone. I mean, from Jerry Seinfeld, Louis C.K. right now, Todd Glass, Andy Kindler. Like, there's so many comics that I adore and love. But, Steve Martin would probably be the biggest influence.
Did you get a chance to see him in Vancouver last week?
No. I was back home. Yeah. Did you see him?
Yes, I did see him. It was a Q&A, and he's very charming, very intelligent.
Yeah.
And naturally a funny guy.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
And I guess it's kind of a shame that he doesn't perform anymore, but, he's past that.
Oh, completely. And I mean, the expectations might be too great. I don't know, but I'd love to see him perform, not necessarily stand-up, but wouldn't it be neat to see Steve Martin perform, like maybe do a bit of a book reading, and then perhaps a sketch or a song, and then maybe just a funny story. I don't know. I feel like an evening with Steve Martin, whatever it was, would be really entertaining.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. Not in that wild and crazy guy kind of thing, because he's past that. And, in other comics, Bob Newhart, Don Rickles, they go on. I mean, until they drop dead, they're going to be performing. And they're already, 80? Do you see yourself going that route?
I honestly can barely see past maybe a year from now. It's hard to tell. I mean, wherever it goes, it goes. I don't look at that life and say that's what I want. I mean, I like the idea of not having to work. I definitely love that. It's just impossible to say.
You were an interviewer at one time, weren't you? On like an Urban Rush type show?
Yeah. I used to, for 3 years of my life, I hosted a community cable access show called Daytime. And 5 days a week.
And were you funny on it?
That's all. It depends who you ask. I would try to be funny, from time to time. But you have to know your place. I mean, some interviews, you're talking about the Garlic Festival. Another interview, you're talking about breast cancer awareness week. So clearly, you can only be funny in the breast cancer interview.
But you would prepare seriously. You'd have legitimate questions, or were people writing your questions for you?
Oh, no. I had to do my research. Actually, that's not fair to say. I mean, there was a producer who would, the PR people, of course, representing the organization, or, the author or the band coming on that would supply us with material. And then if you wanted to do more research beyond that, of course, I'd have to, as much as get online and, review it. I mean, if I was interviewing an author, I would read as much as the book as I could before I became distracted or the television was on. But that was great, because that was where I really got to, you really had to kind of take control. Like, you had to drive the interview. You'd get a guest who was nervous and didn't want to talk, and you had to extract this information somehow. So that was a challenge. I learned so much doing that show. Yeah.
And you were still doing comedy at the time?
That's when I was really just kind of starting out in comedy. Yeah. I just graduated from TV broadcasting. They were looking for a host of the show. I jumped right in and was doing stand-up and stuff at the same time. Yeah.
Fascinating career, Jon Dore.
I'm amazing. I feel like I'm extremely boring. Are people going to listen to this? Will you put this on air?
They'll see your name and they'll listen, probably for 3 or 4 minutes.
We're in a mall. We're in a mall next to a fountain, fake plants, and an escalator. There's a moose over there. There's a stuffed moose.
Now, why do you think you're boring? Because, I interviewed Scott Aukerman last week. He was doing this too. I'd ask questions. Obviously, if I'm asking the question, I think it's interesting.
Oh, it's got nothing to do with you and your questions, even though 5 out of 7 were horrible. For the most part, no, I think it's just how interesting does it sound. Shouldn't I be funny? But I feel like I'm not.
I don't have an answer to that.
Shouldn't we have a laugh track here?
No, definitely not. No, definitely not. Didn't you like watching Tom Snyder's show later? Oh, no, it wasn't later. It was.
No, I know what you mean, though. Yeah. I enjoyed watching it, of course. Yeah.
Bob Costas.
Yeah, Bob Costas.
No laughter, no studio audience. I was playing to an audience, Jon Dore.
I know. It's sad. What am I hiding? I feel like I need laughs, or else I'm not worth being in people's company.
Well.
Oh, God.
I know you have rehearsals to get to, or meetings, or whatever, for the big awards tonight.
I gotta have a cigarette. That's what I have to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Good luck tonight. I know it means a lot to you to win this. Bring this one home.
If I win, I'm giving the award to you, Guy.
Would you?
I would, actually. I'll actually dedicate it to you. How's
Call
that?
me up on stage. All right.
I'm not even joking. If you're there, get ready. It's going to happen. Thank you very much, Guy. Sorry I called you Don earlier. Don McPherson of Air Farce fame.
Yeah, I get that a lot.
Do you really? Okay. Guy, one syllable. Don, one syllable.
Right. I see where you're
McPherson.
going.
So,
all right.
Settle down, buddy.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, Guy.
Jon Dore. Funny guy. You're listening to What's So Funny on CFRO 102.7 FM. And John Wing is about to say the exact same thing.
This is John Wing, and you're listening to What's So Funny on CFRO 102.7 FM in Vancouver and all over the globe on the internet. What is so funny?
Incidentally, you heard right at the end of that interview with Jon Dore that he said if he won, he would give me the award or dedicate it to me. He won. Not a mention. Ha! All right, next up, Harry Doupe sits down for his one-on-one. No fountain in the background for this one, but there are some loud carts going by in the hotel. It's fun. Here we are at the Delta Hotel in St. John with Harry Doupe, former Vancouver boy Harry Doupe, right? Or Fort Langley?
Fort Langley, born and raised.
Well, you got your start in Vancouver, didn't you?
Yeah, Punchlines, Vancouver, December 7th, 1982.
82? Was it 82?
Yeah.
Because I used to see you there all the time, and I can't remember. I know it was the early 80s, so it was 82, all right, yeah. I mean, that was a good crowd to get started with, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was so many good guys around and variety guys, like, the two main guys unquestionably for so long were Ryan Stiles and Colin Campbell, and they each brought something completely different to the table. And so with those guys as your two lead horses, it was, just a great group and a good room. It's weird when you think about it now, because in the context of the way clubs run now, I mean, that place, the early show was at 9:30 at night, which, now late shows are at 9:30 at night. So it was an interesting breeding ground, but, solid room and spoiled in a lot of ways because of that. And so many good people around it. And also we had the advantage of there was the Don Heron show and stuff that, a lot of time during the TV season, people were being brought up to be on that show and they drop in to do the club. So you got to see a lot of really good people.
And I remember Ryan Stiles doing stand-up all the time there and thinking how great he was. And it's a real shame that he never does stand-up anymore, isn't it?
Yeah, it's funny. Like he, even, when he's supposed to be doing stand-up, he brings someone up and does improv stuff. But, I mean, as an example, I remember Ryan and Boyd Banks, who was Boyd Coons at the time, who looked so much alike that they would do a dueling Reverend Jimmy Gutowski impression doing Islands in the Stream. And, man, it was just amazing. And, like, the amount of fun little impromptu things has gone way down from what I recall from those days. But that may just be, be glamorizing the memory.
It could be, yeah. Stand-up wasn't, or was it? Tell me. Was it as big in the early 80s as it is now?
Not really the early 80s. Like, the boom probably started in about 85. That's when... Yucks, as an example, opened in like 84 and 85. Yucks opened Ottawa and Hamilton, and then went into Edmonton and Calgary, and then from beyond, that was the period where it really, like, probably through 88, that was the big boom. That was the time where all of a sudden the industry went from like 60 guys to about and girls to about 250, and the club, it was being sold as the rock and roll of the 80s. We all knew it wouldn't last.
And you mentioned another name, Colin Campbell, who was fantastic, the late Colin Campbell. When you watched guys like him and Stiles, I mean, you obviously knew how good they were, but did you ever foresee that Stiles would become as big as he did, or have thoughts of Colin?
Like, I think you could look at Ryan and think, just based on the physicality of him and everything, that there was something bigger in his future in the medium that need that. Colin, you just thought that the strength of how good his bits would be enough. I mean, Colin was my best friend and mentor in a lot of ways, and like in 1987 we did a 74-day road trip across the States and Canada, and as an example of the feeling of the time about how far you'd come in like 2 years and what the industry seemed to be doing, like everywhere we were, we just kept thinking, well, 2 years from now, when we come back here after you've done Letterman a bunch of times and I've done some lesser credits, we'll be able to do this upright. And and the feeling really was that, I hate the anything is possible type thing, but you just assumed that a guy like that was going to be able to do anything.
Right.
I mean, probably not as a TV actor or anything, but just as a stand-up, when stand-up seemed to have that draw and that grasp that it would all just happen. But I mean, sort of the flow of guys at the time was, it's like you do your amateur nights, and then you get good in amateur nights, and you start doing regular nights, and then you start doing weekend spots, and then you start middling at clubs, and then emceeing, and then you start headlining, and then you get really good at headlining, and then you move on. And then at a certain point, that the ability to move on just stopped. Everyone was still just where they were, and so the flow of it had stopped, and for all of us, it was a weird period.
Did comedy then get more or less respect, or about the same respect, stand-up wise? I'm talking about.
I think probably less respect at the time. I mean, just because everyone was being told that it was a big, great thing, and to a great extent, it was treated that way. Like to do a one-nighter in the late '80s was you're going into town, and man, you're the guy doing the show in town. And 3 years later, you're just the thing that's on the stage, occupying our drinking time.
And what got you into comedy, going down to Vancouver from Fort Langley to try your hand at stand-up?
I mean, I'd always been surrounded by carts. I'd always been surrounded by funny friends and relatives. I have a really, really big family and cousins and stuff, and a lot of really funny people in that. And it's never anything I really envisioned. And then one time I went to Punchlines on an amateur night just to watch, and I thought they were horrible, and I thought I could do better. So
I hear that story a lot from comics.
So I went to, not just about that club though, right?
No.
And and went back a couple weeks later and tried it and did. And then I went back 2 weeks later and bombed. So.
And that's also a common story from stand-ups. But throughout the years, friends of yours and colleagues have come and gone by the wayside, and you've stuck with it. A lot, others too have stuck with it too. But was there ever a time where you just thought, I'm gonna get out of this?
Like every day.
Really?
Yeah, I'm one of those guys that I'm lucky in a lot of ways in terms of writing things and opportunities that come along. But I'm still 90% of the year. I'm still wondering how the rent's going to be paid and stuff and on and on. So, I think I'm at an age of guys who still love doing it and would love to be able to do it in a manner that it wasn't what you were dependent on. I think most of us like it. If there was a gig that you could take behind the scenes somewhere that was solid, we'd do that and do this as a hobby.
As just something you love doing.
Yep.
Yeah. Now you're called the Professor, I hear. When did that come about?
That came about yesterday.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's not anything that needs any great credence or anything.
Okay. But you've traveled this country. I mean, it seems like you've been everywhere. Where haven't you been?
I haven't been to. Where was it? I was just thinking about it. I haven't been to Thunder Bay.
Really?
I have never done a show there. I've been there, but I've never done a show in Thunder Bay. But beyond that, and like the far north, I haven't really done anything in the far north. But 10 Canadian provinces, and I think it's like 46 states.
Oh, really? So I know you lived in the U.S. for a while.
Yeah, I lived in San Francisco for 3 years when that was one of the two best working markets for comedy. That and Boston.
And so you went down there because, that's where you go, right?
Yeah, well, because that was one of the places that, Vancouver was a limited market, and Canada was in a lot of ways. It was nothing for us to drive. Basically, our only money gigs were like driving to Seattle and doing bar things for like $60 or so, and every once in a while you'd save up some money and get in the car and boot down and do like every one-nighter you could in Seattle and every one-nighter you could in Portland, and go into San Francisco and try and get some stage time, or down to LA and try and do the same, and a great way to grow as an artist.
Yeah.
And just do everything and learn from it, and that's what we did on those trips.
So what years are you talking about for San Francisco, and who was coming up with you then?
Well, I was in San Francisco 89 to 92, and I was lucky. I'd worked there for about 3 previous years, but not in a year. And during that time, the immigration laws got tightened up a lot. But the guys who were the guys I really admired and great for me, were friends. People like Will Durst and Bobby Slayton and Jake Johansson, and just sort of the tail end of Paula Poundstone. And it's sad looking at it now, but based on accomplishments. But like the guys who moved there like at the same time and really started doing well were people like Blaine Capatch and Patton Oswalt and Mark Maron and, all those guys were coming into town at the same time. And Margaret Cho, who was a pal, who I talked out of having breast reduction. And
did you talk her into all those tattoos?
that was a different discussion, and it wasn't with me, so... but it was...
Yeah, for a while she was really the alternative darling, and now she's kind of not liked. You probably make fun of her at your statelessness of the industry, Rose.
I would, but the crowds that I play to don't know what she does now.
Yeah.
But no, I still think Margaret's great. But that market was just... Again, it was on the West Coast what Boston is to the East Coast, which was a real good, solid working market as opposed to a showcase market. Like San Francisco was where you went to work clubs and make club money, where LA was where you went to try and do sets for free on the hope of being discovered and something come out of that.
So after San Francisco, you moved back to Canada?
Yeah.
And why?
Well, I really wanted to do, it's a long story in San Francisco, but part of it was necessity. I'd lived there a year, and I did this extensive road trip through the Southwest in the States, and I booked it because I wanted to do, there was a lot of things I wanted to do around these obscure dates. Like there was a show in Jonesboro, Arkansas, but there's an off day before it. And Jonesboro is like 60 miles from Memphis, so I could do Memphis all on my off day, and then that day a show in Monroe, Louisiana with an off day before it, so I could do New Orleans on my off day. And there's one of the drive-through Clovis, New Mexico is the great old Norman Petty recording studios where Buddy Holly does all his recordings and stuff. So I booked all these obscure dates around it because I wanted to do all that stuff. And then the first day of the trip, I was in the middle of the desert in Southern California, and the engine fell out of my car. And literally, I was at a four-way stop in the middle of nowhere, and I turned the corner, and there was like a jolt, and something had gone drastically wrong. And I see like bolts and stuff skipping down the road, and the engine had dropped out of my car, and it was like no credit card at the time, being an uneducated comic, and really no way to get to the gigs. The only way I could get the car fixed is if I did the gigs, but now I can't get to the gigs to get the car, so
Catch 22.
Yeah, so I had to dump the car off to a wrecker, which got me literally like just enough money to get the bus ticket to get to Houston for the first shows. And so that trip ended up being, instead of coming home with a bunch of money, I ended up coming home even, but with no car. So now all these obscure places that I wanted to go to, now it's just a real hardship to get to. And from that point, it's just, it's one of those markets that without a car, you're just not going to make enough money to do anything. And in the meantime, I really wanted to do behind-the-scenes work in TV, and Canada just seemed the best place for me to do that at the time.
And Toronto, rather than Vancouver.
Yeah, look, my watch is still on West Coast time, and I've been gone for years and years and years. And it's like, for the TV writing I do, if there was anything in Vancouver that I could do, I'd be there in a second. It's my home, it's home, and it's where I'd love to be, but there's just not the TV work that sustains it.
So what kind of TV work are you doing now?
Over the year, I've written, about 25 award shows. I've written 5 Junos and 6 Geminis and Genies and NHL awards and all those, and wrote for the Olympic coverage last year. I wrote for sports game shows. I wrote for a Discovery Channel show called Qubits. Or, just whatever it can possibly come up, try and grab onto.
You think, like a writer, you can work from anywhere.
But it's not. That's like my friend. You try and explain it to your friends. They're like, but can't you just be at home? It's like, no.
Hit send.
You sort of got to be in the production office
I see.
And be there.
Yeah. So I know you don't like to name drop, but you've also worked with lots of people. You must have had some funny stories over the years. Any that immediately come to mind?
You'd think that I would. Comics?
Comics or entertainers or people that we might know.
Man, there's been a million.
I don't want to put you on the spot.
There's a million people and a million stories. I remember one time, not to drop names, but Dave Foley is a huge pal of mine, and one time I was in Vancouver and I was going down to visit him in LA. And I tell him I'll be there Wednesday at 10 o'clock at night. And I get to his place, which was in Laurel Canyon, and there's about 1 million steps up to it. And I get up to the door, and there's just a note on the door that says, Harry's friend, Dave's not here, but the house is open. And he just left the house open. And I go in, and he never comes home that night. And the first time I see him is late the next night when there's already a party going on at his house with about 300 people. And then the next night we went to the Troubadour to see Sloan play, and after that the band and about half the crowd came back to his place, and we were up really late, and I was going to go to San Francisco the next day, but now there wasn't enough time because I woke up too late. So Dave says, well, why don't you just come out with us tonight? And I go, all right. And I don't know where we're going or anything. And a limo shows up, and we go to the Playboy Mansion.
Yeah.
For I forget what fight was on, but we go watch a fight at the Playboy Mansion, then down to the Arrowhead Pond in Anaheim to see Hole, because John Kastner, who's with us, is a great friend of Courtney Love. We leave before Marilyn Manson. We go back into L.A. for the News Radio Rap Party. Then we go back to the Playboy Mansion for the Boogie Nights Party, where normally you don't see real comics and real non-comics in the same place, but for whatever reason, there's nothing but comics there. I mean, just it's weird that you see Dan Aykroyd and Andy Dick in the same room, or Kato Kalin was still there at the time too. And then we left there and then back to Foley's, where there was already a party going on with about 300 people.
He's living the life.
He was at that time. So he's not starring on news radio anymore, and he's been divorced again since then. So I think life is probably a little more slender now. Like we always judged the kids in the hall based on we always thought that Bruce was the moodiest and Mark was the best actor and Kevin was the funniest and Scott was the gayest and Dave was the richest. And now I don't know if that's the makeup anymore.
Now here we are at the Canadian Comedy Awards, and you've been involved with them for how many years?
Well, I've never really been involved in the Comedy Awards. I've done the State of the Industry thing, a direct ripoff of Andy Kindler in Montreal, but specific to Canadian stuff. I've done that for 6 years now, but I've never been involved at all. And every year I would rail out against all the problems and inequities in the system and stuff. And then last year, for the first time, they wanted to elect a person from the industry onto the board, and I was lucky to be chosen for that. And then this year they branched out and having different committees and stuff, and I headed up the awards committee and was on the programming committee, and out of that got to produce the awards this year. And so this is my 1 year where I've really been involved, and a bunch of stuff has happened.
Oh, like what?
Oh, I mean, just in terms of the awards, nailing down the criteria and going from a private industry-only event that's not well treated or respected to a big giant theater show with the general public and a real award show, and just a lot of change in direction that people thought people yelled loud last year that was necessary.
And you were just at a bitch session, and are there going to be changes next year?
No, I think, this year to last year's night and day.
Yeah.
Because last year was basically demanding that it not be this piece of shit. And this year, now this year there's set criteria for how, you can look on the website and see what the criteria is for each category, and you know what it is instead of just wondering or guessing, which is sort of always in the past. Best newcomer was always people, half the nominees were people who had been around for 30 years but still never considered, last year there was a guy nominated for best newcomer for the second time 7 years after his previous one. So things like that got fixed, and so all that happened. So this year, most of the talk was just about finessing how they handle that, and just finessing the way the sketch and improv shows run. That's what probably half of the town hall meeting was about, and just a little bit of fine-tuning some of the award stuff.
And you're going to be gone? You're not involved next year?
If asked to produce the awards, I would do it. But it was just way too much stuff that I did this year, and happy to let someone else do the board thing. And committee-wise, I think this year a lot of the heavy lifting was done, and based on the town hall meeting today, there doesn't seem to be, there's always going to be tweaking. It's always a process and evolution, and when issues crop up or when a new medium develops or something needs to be acknowledged, you can work on that. But, I think right now it's pretty healthy, and I think people are pretty happy with it. So, let someone else or a bunch of other people go in and put their stamp on it.
And there's always going to be complaining from people out west going, it's just Toronto.
Yeah, well, and again, I mean, I mentioned today that, as soon as the nominations came out, Richard Lett was online talking about how it should be the Toronto Comedy Awards because there's no one from the West represented again as usual. And it's like, well, last year there was about 20 people from the West nominated, a sketch troupe from the West won for the second year in a row. This year there are like 15 jurors from the West, and there are about 20 nominees from the West. So, you're factually inaccurate. And again, he was posting that from Toronto, where he was excited about doing anti-corner gas jokes, which represents Western Canada, Toronto crowd. So
he has a big rivalry with Brent Butt,
Oh no, I know. His website bills him as Western Canada's top comedy headliner. So someday Brent might be able to challenge him on that. And again, I love Richard, but my mandate is to point out when people are just heightening their situation.
Yes, it's your yearly talk, state of the industry, statelessness of the industry.
Yeah, which again, statelessness of the industry is one of those cute titles that they put on it that was unnecessary. But for years and years, at the Comedy Awards, they always tried to overly cute everything. Like this year's the first year that the winners were just called Best Male Stand-Up. Right. Every year it was pretty funny. And, cute was always an aspect of the Comedy Awards until it was mercilessly beaten and murdered last year by Mike Wilmot, never to be seen again. So,
but you do rail against the hyperbolic press releases and websites, and I mean there is, as you said, people will naturally react to something when told over and over again how great it is. The natural reaction is to try to shoot it down, and also when somebody gets to be a little too big, we love to shoot them down too. Saying,
well, you know what? Again, I think. I don't know in Canada generally that we try to shoot things down as much. Like I can tell you this, like with the awards process this year, like part of the board thing was the stand-up stuff had always been really heavily handled by a couple of people connected with clubs. That really led to you have to work their clubs to be nominated or to win, and that was one of the things that really got hammered out in a very heated, debated session. And his intention was if we open it up, that it'll always be the same people every year. And my relationship with awards has been that it's never that in Canada. Like if you take the Junos or the Geminis, regardless of that act or actor is the best for 3 years straight, the third year they're never going to win the award because the Canadians, and it's not that they're tearing people down, it's just that they think, okay, well they had a nice time in the sun, let's vote the next one in. I mean, whoever wins best actor at the Geminis is never nominated the next year.
That's right,
yeah, things like that. So I think it sort of polices itself in more of a humble sense than in tearing people down. And I think if people do tear people down, it's because they've been built up by outside force. Again, I mean, I talked a ton about corner gas today. Just that, I love Brent, and I'm really happy the show did well. I mean, I still have the email that he sent me the week that it was debuting, where he's asking his friends to get the word out that our show's coming on, and we're up against Survivor and Friends, so we're probably going to be in trouble. So try and get the word out so we can survive. And I'm really happy that they had a good run. And man, I love all the people on the show and a lot of the people who are writers and everything. And I think generally the industry would feel a lot better about it if every time you heard anything about it, CTV wasn't pretending that it was the greatest show ever and they cured cancer and fed everyone in Africa. It's like, yeah, it was a good, competent show that there was a couple of laughs in. And, be proud and happy of that. But but I wish that the marketing people at CTV wouldn't pretend it's the biggest thing in the world.
Yeah.
And I think that's, what happened this year with them getting something to Geminis. It's like, yes, we really like you, but stop telling us you're creating history every time.
And I guess the same goes for individual comics who create their own websites, who are building themselves up.
Well, again, a lot of, the great thing about the internet is the amount of shared information and stuff. The bad part about it is that anyone can say anything, and if one person buys that, then in a lot of cases it's one too many. Again, every year I end up talking about Des Reed a lot, who's a comic in Saskatoon who, pretends he's some big giant act, and bills himself as like the world's greatest comic and stuff, and always lists credits that are completely false. And I mean, I know people. Al Ray in Winnipeg, Al knows a guy who got fired from his job for booking Des Reed into a corporate gig based on he went on Des's website, and saw how amazing this guy is and booked him for the function and did not play well from what I understand.
And Does this ever get back to the artist? Your little
Oh yeah,
comment?
I mean, a lot of the times the artist is in the room, you know.
Right.
So I mean, being the world's greatest comic doesn't have time for these functions, but yeah, no, a lot of times it does, and look, and again, like, there's, Mark Breslin is always in the room, and there are some years that there are a million issues with Yuck Yucks, and it's one of the big fish. It's going to be something that gets discussed, in the industry, and there's times that the afterword has been fractious. And times not. I'm not sure if you were there at the end today when
he came up to you.
First thing. That's a constant every year. The first person I talk to / deal with immediately following is Mark, who is either angry, but in a manner that's manageable, or just wants to clarify something, and and to his credit, I mean, he's always there and is And whether it's a good year or a bad year for them, which always gets reflected regardless in what I say, he's always there for it. And even though our work relationship over the years, I left Yucks in 1993, our work relationship has been strained and stuff. Generally, I still consider him a friend. And again, to his credit, he can sit through that stuff every year. And I mean, on our level, it's much less obviously than when Kindler, commits suicide annually in Montreal in front of people who can make him real money. But
that's right. Yeah. I got mentioned a year or two ago, didn't I?
Yeah. You've been mentioned a couple times.
Oh, what?
Yeah, you and Ian Boothby are often often topics of it, and every once in a while.
Why not today?
And because there was just, first of all, Ian wasn't here this year.
That's right.
Second of all, just the amount of web traffic on comedycouch.com has slowed down incrementally. So,
yeah, you're right. Your forums are dead.
Yeah, so making fun. I mean, you can't make fun of Ian for not doing anything besides being on the website. Is a moot point. This
yeah, he
year.
and I are 1 and 2, I believe.
I think you guys are 1 and 2. And again, there's nothing seemingly outwardly talkable about Will Davis and yourself this year. So,
Oh, wow. What do you mean?
Nothing. I just.
What about me and Will?
Nothing. I just read back and forth on the forums every once in a while, and people have differing opinions on things sometimes.
Oh, sure. Yeah. In my defense, we will say.
Do you need a defense?
Yeah. Because, we do post, we did post way too much on there. He's quit. I haven't quit, but there's nothing to say anymore. That we both work on the computer all day. And so, you're writing something, and then you just take a break, and you just start going to your bookmarks, and you go, I wonder if anyone's done anything. So you're right there. So it's not as if we just sit at home and we're only on Comedy Couch all day.
No, I understand how the process works.
Okay, good. Just so we're clear.
But I mean, but generally, there's been past years where anyone could say anything, and Ian Boothby would respond to it within 40 seconds.
Sure, yeah. I always appreciate Ian's posts, even though I disagree often with him. Still, anyway. And then the other one was with David Cross.
What was with David Cross?
I don't know. I wrote a review about him, and
oh, that's right. Well, was that the one where we had the comment of the drunken Indian?
Yes,
quote?
yes.
Yeah. It's funny because David Cross. I mean, David Cross hasn't changed. David Cross is the type of act that so many people dislike what he does, but all he needs to do is keep doing what he does to build that base of the people who really like it, and that's where he is. Because I remember in the San Francisco Laugh Off in. Would have been 89 or 90, and David Cross was in it. And for those, at the time it was a much bigger thing than it is today, but it's still a big thing. But there's 2 weeks of 20 comics each, and it gets whittled down to 5 finalists and stuff. And the final show of the week would always be outdoors at the Palmason Winery on the side of a mountain outside of Saratoga, California. And David Cross was himself during his set. And he was in 20th place out of 20 going into that. And he pissed so many people off during his set that nobody wanted to be seen. And it's an hour and a half out of San Francisco. And nobody wanted to be seen as being the person who would give him a ride back to San Francisco in case the producer saw it and, wouldn't give them work. So I was the one person who didn't care and gave David Cross a ride back to San Francisco. So...
Yeah, and for the record, as I mentioned to Jon Dore yesterday...
I'm not familiar with him, but keep going.
David and I have patched up our differences just last week.
I know it was an issue with a lot of people who wondered and worried.
Yes. So, as we age, Harry, and it's been, 27 years since you first started. And I saw you, and I still, in my mind's eye, you're that young comic. And
in my head, I'm still that young comic.
Yeah, that's how we age,
that's
right?
the issue, though.
Yeah. The outside world sees us as old guys, but how does it feel being an elder statesman now of the comedy?
It's funny, because, it's strange. Because I certainly haven't done anything to receive any heightened respect over the years. But it's funny,
you've hung around.
That's about it. People hear stories, and you're that guy in the story somehow. And when Andrew Clark brought his book out,
yes, Stand and Deliver.
Stand and Deliver a few years ago. It was so odd. Again, I'm never in Vancouver as much as I want to be. I'm probably in BC about 6 or 7 weeks of the year generally, and all of a sudden, I'm doing a set somewhere horrible in Vancouver, and I've got all these young comics coming up who are all excited because I'm the guy in the book, and it's just like, yeah, but it's not about anything good,
If you were around.
Yeah. That's about it. Sometimes all you have to do is just stay around. And
well, when's your book going to come out?
Well, based on what will go in the book, when I can afford the lawyers who can make sure that it gets done.
All right, Harry Doupe, thanks.
Thanks so much.
And next time you're in Vancouver, come live in the studio.
I would love to. Night. I'll be back. I'll be back for about a month in December.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Harry.
My pleasure.
My thanks to Harry Doupe and Jon Dore for their extended conversations with me in St. John, New Brunswick. Next week we have another, this time an hour-long conversation I had with Yuck Yuck's CEO and founder, Mark Breslin. So tune in next Sunday night, 11 p.m. for that. Thanks for listening. I'm Guy McPherson.